Gunton Hall in the past? To Gunton Hall? You have, yeah? When was it? What year? Oh, April. I thought you could say years and years ago. Oh, very nice. April, yeah?
1977, I was in the fire service in Lowestoft.
Were you really? Oh, fantastic. 1977, blimey. Wow, so do you kind of remember it a little bit like that, maybe? Yeah? Amazing. Oh, it's lovely to find out that people have been here years and years ago. I've had lots of people, obviously, from this come up and speak to me and tell me all of their stories, which was fantastic. I'll tell you a bit more about that as we go through as well. Before I start, one thing I will mention to you all is that there not only is this Gunton Hall in Suffolk, but there's also another Gunton Hall in Norfolk. It's only about an hour's car ride away, but most of the information you will find, whether it was the leaflet that we used to give people here, or whether it's the information online, or whether it's your information on the wall in your chalet. You might have sort of a canvas picture with some information about the Harbord family. All of that information is actually wrong. And it all relates to the hall in Norfolk. So you might have some information about the Harbord family. That family's a family in Norfolk. And what you find is most of the information is actually, got cross-wired from years and years of, just being named Gunton Hall and nobody realising that there was two Gunton Halls actually here. I have asked historians, local historians, and they've said that there's no relationship between either hall. I'm not sure I really believe that yet, but I haven't found any information to really discredit it or whatever. So, but I'm still on the lookout for that. To the point where even nowadays, if you don't put in our postcode, sometimes people end up at the other Gunton Hall. It's actually a residential home, so they get loads of different people, guests. They get they visit an acts in the evening. They get some of the bands going there, knocking on the door and saying, "How are we here for the evening?" But yeah, anyway. So just to let you know before we start. So this is my first slide. I'm going to ask you to use your imagination a little bit with this, because what I'm trying to show you is the lands of what we used to own compared to the lands that we do own today, is there is a massive difference. If you are from Lowestoft, or have been to Lowestoft here before, everything that we call Gunton here in Lowestoft, you would have owned if you were Lord of the Manor back when the hall was first built. And I'll let you know, when I say the first hall, this isn't the original hall. This hall was built in the year of 1810, and it's actually the second hall on the Gunton estate. The very first hall was built between the years of 1154 and 1189, so an incredible amount of time ago. Unfortunately, it doesn't stand today. All that we have left of that hall is about 4 or 5 little bricks underneath a tree stump. That is it. But you can still see them today, and I do have a map if anyone wants to venture out there whilst they're on holiday here. So anyway, this is all the land that we used to once own, everything that we call Gunton today. It's really hard to tell you how much land exactly this is. I haven't had a look, I should do, but there's sort of 2 Tesco's on there, there's a dentist, a Foxborough pub, there's a harvester, there's over 6,000 houses, there's a primary school, so it's an incredible amount of land, and that's what we once used to own. Compared to nowadays though, we only own this little section. That is it, 55 acres. That Warners own. And I'll tell you why and how bits and bobs got chopped off as we go along. Now, to just show you as well, as we're on the old hall, so obviously we're sitting up here, this is the new hall. If you head down towards our archery area, you'll see a little break in the trees to the left, and you can walk down into the woodlands. So that is this pathway down here, you walk all the way down, and it basically comes out to a church called Gunton St Peter's Church. And next to that, that was where the original hall was built. So kind of in the middle of the land. Now, apparently Gunton wasn't wealthy enough to be featured in the Domesday Survey, and the way sort of Gunton came about is it was basically a bit of a money-making scheme. Apparently the king wanted more money from the lords wanted more money from his tenants, and so that's what they did. They carved out a piece of land and called it Gunton, and put a house there. In the middle of it. Now, I was told as well, when the house was first built, it was actually made out of timber, as bricks weren't even a thing between, the 1100s, apparently so there we are. So really interesting stuff. Other areas we will talk about is the Gunton Deans area. This is the beach area here. And you've got a place called Hall Farm down here as well. That's also, obviously, as you can see, all used to be parts of the estate, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So I'm going to try and tell you quite a lot of information, and I want to give you some information on the older hall as well, because I think that's really important to know where we actually come from. Now, this is the very first picture of that original Gunton Hall. We're sitting proudly there next to Gunton St Peter's Church, and notice about 3 or 4 other houses compared to the over 6,000 that we have today. So an incredible amount of people now live here compared to what they used to be. So to start off then, we're going to start off in the year of 1190. That's the first piece of evidence we have of anyone being here at the hall. I have picked out just a few families to just tell you a little bit about when they were here at the old hall and to give you a bit of our old history as well. But anyway, back to 1190, we had a man here called Richard de Gunton, and he was the first person here at Gunton Hall. Apparently in 1190, he was having an argument with a local man over what parts of the beach area that he owned, what parts of the foreshore that he owned. Basically, back then, wreckages from the North Sea would wash up on the beach, and people wanted the loot from these wreckages. That's what they were arguing over, really. You could get all types of things in there, boating material, cloth, wine. That's what they were arguing over. Luckily, our man, Richard de Gunton, he came on top. He won the loot, which obviously added to Gunton's fortune. And like I said, that's the first piece of evidence we have of anyone being here on the Gunton estate. Now, I have included another family in 1316, the de Loudon family. At the moment, we don't know a lot about that family. All we do know is that they used to own vast estates in a nearby village, which is now referred to as Lound, obviously from their last name. So moving on then to 1451, there was an interesting character here called Sir Henry Inglows. 1451 was actually the year of this man's death. And he had quite a lot of money actually. He had 14 different manor houses, all on his will to be passed down to his family. However, Gunton Hall was a little bit different. It was on his will to be sold off to repay some of his debts, as he liked to live lavishly and he liked to gamble as well. Now, apart from that information, it was really hard to find any more information about Sir Henry Inglows. However, I did find some information by finding out one of his very good friends and family members was quite famous, and that was this man on the right-hand side here, Sir John Fastolf. Now, you might not know who I mean when I say Fastolf, but if I show you this picture, I wonder if you know who I mean. Anyone know? This is an actor playing a character called Falstaff, who is in 4 of William Shakespeare's plays. He was a character, or was based on a character from William Shakespeare. So, to cut a very long story short, there was a man from the area here, a very famous man called Sir John Fastolf, who used to own Caister Castle, who's not too far away from here. Mr. Fastolf served in the same war as Joan of Arc when the English lost, and for whatever reason he was temporarily stripped of his knighthood and was then known as a coward or a cowardly character. William Shakespeare actually incorporated that in one of the characters that he sort of made up. And he, instead of calling his character Sir John Fastolf, he called him Falstaff. And he misspelt the name incorrectly on purpose to imply this cowardice and impotence. And through that, I was able to find out a little bit more information on Sir Henry Inglows. I read that Sir Henry Inglows was 7 times Knight of the Shire, and he was also a Knight of the Garter as well, with Sir John Fastolf. They were really up there with the people to be in the 15th century. They shared money, they shared houses. Sir Henry Inglows was imprisoned twice within his lifetime within the wars that he served, and Fastolf actually paid some money to get him out of that imprisonment. I did actually find as well a Cambridge University study on politics in the 15th century, and it does mention our Sir Henry Inglows, but it will cost about £40 for me to buy, so I'm going to try and wangle it for free somehow before I spend my hard-earned money on that. If I do find out any more information, it will definitely be going in this presentation. Moving now to 1571, we had a man called Robert Root here at Gunton Hall, and we go back to this first picture that I showed you. This actually is a hand-drawn map of the local area, and the first ever one that someone had drawn, and in this case it was Robert Root. They were still having that same age-old argument as they were having 400 years earlier, that right to wreckage argument over who owns what part of the beach area and who got the loot from these wreckages. And that's the reason why this map was drawn. Obviously it's great because he quartered on the right here and Lowestoft over there to the left. Historians actually found out quite a lot about the area from this map, so it's great for them. But again, Robert Root, he came out on top. He won the loot to these wreckages, which once again added to Gunton's fortune. So moving on then to the year of 1724, there was a man here called William Lewson. Now he was meant to be a man of importance in the area. He was a wealthy local fish merchant and was said to own one of the most beautiful houses in Great Yarmouth as well. Now interestingly, recently I have done a little bit more of research on William Lewson. Apparently not only did he used to own Gunton Hall, but he used to own a Fishley Hall, which is near Norwich. And Fishley Hall nowadays is a residential home and it's a wedding venue as well, a very posh, nice wedding venue. Now, at this Fishley Hall, apparently underneath Fishley Hall are these pathways which go all the way down from the hall, all the way down towards the Broads. And there's also like a turning point within the land that the boats can come along from the Broads, turn and go back out again. And it's said that years and years ago, this Fishley Hall used to be used for a lot of smuggling. So whether that smuggling has anything to do with William Lewson becoming a wealthy local fish merchant, I think that should be my next point of call, and see if I can find any more information on that. Interesting as well, William Lewson married a lady called Elizabeth Hewling, who had two brothers that were supporters of the Duke of Monmouth, and they were actually publicly executed for being part of the Monmouth Rebellion. So I thought that was really a really interesting fact. Anyway, William and Elizabeth, they had a son called Hewling Lewson, who acquired both estates upon his father's death in 1756. Now, Hewling was only 21 years old when he acquired both halls, or so we think, around about that age. And it didn't take him long before he ended up finding a fine bed of clay somewhere along his Gunton estate. He wanted to turn this into sort of his business venture, really. They were kind of a family that really wanted to put themselves on the map. And so what he did is he took some clay and he sent it off to a factory in London called the Bow Street Factory. And they were producing china and pottery at the time. And they actually analysed this clay for him. They analysed the clay and they sent it back to Hewling, and they told him that his clay was even better than their own clay that they were using in their factory at the time to make china and pottery. So Hewling was really excited about this and thought, well great, I can open my own factory. But obviously this ruffled a few feathers, and people tried by hook or by crook to really nullify his sort of business venture before it even got off the ground. Luckily though, he was renting out parts of his land to a man called Philip Walker at the time, and he made old kitchen tiles, so he had a better idea of how to turn this into a business venture. And they did that together at this Hall Farm area. They even opened a temporary kiln and a furnace at this Hall Farm estate, and that's when they started producing the very earliest sort of china and pottery. The house on the left-hand side there, that is Hall Farm. A couple of years ago it was sold off at over £400,000, so it still stands today. So later on in their business venture, they took some clay from the cliffs, they washed it here in the Warren house, and then they cut it up, Wholesome Cart, our only man-made school in Lowestoft called Cart School. They took it up there, and it came out about, I think it was about a couple of minutes ride, to where the old China factory, or Lowestoft China factory, was opened. It was opened between the years of 1757 and 1802. That's a period of about 45 years, and they sold this china and pottery to the UK and abroad for that entire time period. Now there has been some stories about Hewling Lewson not really having much involvement within the opening of the Lowestoft China factory. Some people say he did, some people say he didn't. Whatever the story, it was great obviously for the local area to have a china factory here. Nowadays the very early items are collectible items, and the Lowestoft China has also been featured in an episode of the Antiques Roadshow as well. So just a few years after the factory was opened, for whatever reason, Hewling Lewson actually went bankrupt. And this is a couple of adverts in the London Gazette. One on the left-hand side there saying he did indeed go bankrupt, and one on the right where they are selling off all his possessions. I did have a Google of the King's Head Inn in Bungay, and apparently it's still open. So I will go and have a look down there and just I don't know what I'm looking for really, whether the owner will know anything about selling off some of Hewling Lewson's, land or whatever. But it'd be really interesting to find out. Moving on then to 1760. 1862, a man called Sir Charles Saunders actually bought both estates from Hughley Newson, and he bought them for £16,050. Now, that was a small sum for the amount of sort of hall and land and estate that he was getting. Sir Charles Saunders is arguably one of the most famous people that we have had here at Gunton Hall. He's a naval hero, so much so that he's actually buried in Westminster Abbey. Now, Sir Charles Saunders had a very successful naval career. He quickly went through the ranks before he was made Commander-in-Chief of a Mediterranean fleet during the Anglo-Spanish War, in which they chased down and captured a Spanish treasure ship called Hermione. Now, aboard this Spanish treasure ship was the most amount of prize money ever awarded to British warships, even today. In today's prices, that's about £9.7 million they found aboard just one ship. And Saunders' part and share of that prize money actually formed the basis of his fortune and enabled him to buy Gunton Hall. And there's been a few stories about him being here, Sir Charles Saunders being at Gunton. He did have a home in London, but used this home and this sort of estate as his retirement home, and spent many months here, turning some of the unusable land